Hi there. Thank you so much for taking time to view this video, and I appreciate those who are coming back or here for the first time. My name is Kelly, and I am the crocheter here with Kelly Rene every day, and I wanted to share this really fun, great project with you. This happens to be a rectangle granny square baby blanket. Now, the size that I made it in is for a baby blanket, and I think actually it's a little bit smaller than a crib size, but perfect for taking on the go, putting over the top of a car seat, or just as a receiving blanket. The size that this is it is 42 inches long, and it's 32 inches wide this way. So a long 42 inches, 32 wide. Now I used just one cake of this Caron Baby Cakes beautiful like self-striping yarn here, and that's what's created the stripes here. I want to let you know that there was no color changing, there was no color planning, there was no color blocking. I just kept crocheting and I got this wonderful, wonderful result. So I wanted to share with you exactly how I did this, and you're going to find that it is super easy, super absolute beginner friendly, and we're going to get a new look at the granny stitch. So I'm going to be right back with all of the instructions. Okay, let's talk supplies. So first and foremost, you're going to need only one cake of the Caron Baby Cakes, and this happens to be number 4 weight yarn. So you can really use any 4 weight yarn that you have. If you wanted to use a different color or keep it a solid color or change colors, 4 weight is what I used here to get the dimensions that we're looking at. Now on here, the crochet hook that is suggested is a 5mm. I went up to a 6mm. Okay, so I'm using a 6mm hook, and all that means is that the barrel here is a little bit bigger. I like to do that for afghans or blankets because then it gives it a little bit more drape and softness. They're not quite as stiff. Now, additionally, as we look at our label, it's an 8.5 ounce and 560 yards of length, okay, or 512 meters. So there is a chunk of yarn here. So that's why we only need one skein to make those dimensions that I had mentioned, which are 42 long by 32 wide. Okay, if you want to make it smaller, if you want to make it larger, you just keep going, and you'll see what I mean once we get into the instructions. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a 6mm hook. We're going to be using that. And then we're going to be needing at the very end a needle for putting our ends in, or weaving our ends in. And then I'm going to use some stitch markers here at the beginning as we're getting used to where we're going to be putting, you know, our hook and making our corners. They'll come in handy for that. So very minimal, but again, no color blocking. We're just using self-striping yarn here, and we're gonna let the yarn kind of do all the work and create the beautiful striping effect. So I'll be back with the start. Okay, we are ready to get into things. So I picked a number 4 weight that's just a color that I felt would show up a little bit better on the video here. So when we're doing our stitches, you can see what's going on. Additionally, I have a 6mm Clover Amour hook. I really like this, so nice and smooth on the barrel here. It has a nice ergonomic handle, feels nice in your hand. If you're interested, I'll put a link down below. And then I also have a couple stitch markers here, so you'll see how those are going to come in handy. But first things first, we need to get our yarn on the hook. Now, if you are brand new to crochet, I suggest going back. I have a couple videos, and one in particular about learning how to crochet in 2 hours. Now, that might sound like a long time, but there is practice that's involved, and I will link those videos that I think will be helpful for you as background as we get into some of the stitches that we have here. But all you really need to know is number 1, how to chain, number 2, how to slip stitch, single crochet, and then double crochet. So, and all of those are fundamental stitches that are used in so many places in crochet. So very easy for the absolute beginner here. All right, so we need to get our yarn on the hook. First things first. So I am going to create a slip knot where I'm going to go around 1.5 times. I am going to pull up a loop here, put my hook through, snug down, but not too tight, just so that it can go very freely on the barrel here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my yarn around my fingers and a nice loose tension. Now, as we're creating this first chain, we wanna be sure that we are nice and loose. So often new crocheters have a little bit tighter feel on their hook. So make sure that you create this looseness here on your loops. So as you come around, you're not trying to pull through. Additionally, I tell my students, if you would, that you want to always have your fingers down below your very last stitch, and you're going to be pulling down while you're pushing up with your hook, so that when you bring this through, you're actually pushing up to bring it through underneath. So I encourage you to make sure that there's always enough room. So that's kind of a pro tip, if you would. So we are going to chain 25. So go ahead and go 1, 2, 3. And chaining is just yarning over and pulling that loop through. Okay. So we're going to go for 25 chains. 25 chains. I'm going to try to stay in here nice and close so that you can see what I'm doing. So yarn over, pull through that loop, yarn over, pull through that loop. Let's give a count on where we are at, okay? Now, as we look at our chain here, you're gonna notice it's not perfect, okay? But you wanna have some consistency, all right? I'm gonna use my darning needle here to count my stitches. My stitches, each one of my chains here is a stitch. It's called the chain stitch. And each one of these braids is 1. So I'm going to count from my beginning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, so that means I need to do 4 more. 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Okay, so now that I have 25 on here, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a single crochet in each one of my chains back. Okay, so that means that in the second stitch from my hook, so coming out of my loop here, that's 1 stitch and 2 stitch, or my second chain, I am going to single crochet. Single crochet is going right back in, and I just use 1 loop. Some people will use 2 loops, but I use just 1 to go back into my chain, yarn over, pull up that loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. That's my first one. Second one, go into the next chain, yarn over, pull up that loop, 2, yarn over, pull through, and continue on all the way across the row. And now again, if you feel like this is going a little fast for you, that's okay, all right? Then go back and just check out my video on learning to crochet, because I'm going to give you all the basics, holding the yarn, getting the practice in to get nice, even stitches for your chains, for your single crochet, how to turn. It's just really good. It slows everything down for you, and it gives you even some time to practice while I'm right there showing you all of the steps, okay? And I really encourage you to take that time to really learn those fundamentals really well. It's important, okay? Because you're building everything from the future on. I know we all want to like get in there and start doing stuff and see results, but that class walks you through the process and creates some swatches and just gives you some really good techniques. And I don't like to say tricks. It's just developing your skills, okay? And nice tips to be sure that you're doing all the right things to get really good, consistent results in your crochet projects going forward. And it takes time. It just takes time. So it's not an overnight thing, and it's not going to happen super quick. But each time you do something, you're going to learn. All right, and I'm on my very last chain here, so I'm going to put my last single crochet in, yarn over and pull through. And now a good habit to get into is simply counting your stitches. Okay, counting your stitches. So we're gonna go back and we should have 24. So I'm gonna kind of bring this up here, and every single one of these V's or braid looking stitches is going to be a single crochet, and it's the top of our single crochet. So I'm going to count each one of those. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to put my thing in here and I'm going to kind of go forward. All right, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. All right. 21, 22, 23, and 24 is coming right around this corner. And I am going to mark that as my first stitch with a stitch marker. I rely on stitch markers. I still do for so many of my projects. So do not feel bad about using stitch markers. It's not cheating. It's just making sure that, especially when we are kind of going back and forth, we don't want to skip stitches. We don't want to miss stitches, because then our work starts to look like a trapezoid and it's not the way it's supposed to be. So counting stitches is really important. Okay, so our next step is going to be starting our granny clusters. Okay, what I wanted to do was briefly bring back our project so you can see what we already did. So what we have done is down the middle here, we have a row of single crochets. That's what we just created. Okay, this right here. Now on that, we are now going to start making our granny clusters go around and around and around. Okay, and that is how we're going to, continue the project. So that's our next step. Let me get this out of the way. And now we are going to, I'm going to put my hook back into my work here because I'm at the very end of that single crochet row, okay? And I'm gonna scooch back in here so we're nice and close so you can see what I've got. And the first thing we're gonna do is we are gonna start by chaining 3. Okay, this chain 3 is gonna be our first double crochet in our granny cluster. 1, 2, and 3, okay? And we are going to turn our work, okay? Just like we traditionally would. All right, now this is, like I said, this is the first double crochet in our granny cluster. So we're going to now double crochet 2 more times back into that very same stitch that this chain 3 is coming out of. So if I look at my work, it is going to be, as we look down here, here is the last stitch that was at the bottom of that row, okay? So right here, I'm gonna go underneath those 2 V's. So I'm going to go back in here. So now to do a double crochet, we have to yarn over first, and I'm going to go right into the base of that stitch. So this is going to be the second double crochet in that stitch. A granny cluster always has 3 double crochets. So I've gotten 2 of them done. One is that chain, and the next one is the official double crochet. And now to make that third one, I'm going to go right back into that stitch. I'm going to pull up that loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. So now this right here is my first granny cluster. 1, 2, 3 double crochets. All right. Now, in order to continue, I got to make my next granny cluster with 3 double crochets. I'm going to skip 2 stitches. So as I kind of turn this and look at the top, okay, I am going to see my V's again. 1, 2, 3. I am going to go underneath this stitch right into the third one from where I ended. So I'm going to skip 2 and I'm going to go into the third one. Okay, I'm going to pull that back out, get my hook back in. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to skip 2, skip, and then go into the third under both V's, okay? And I'm going to do my first double crochet, pull up that loop, 3 on, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Second double crochet right back in that same spot. And then the third double crochet. Sorry, my tension back here is not what I want it to be. Yarn over, go back in that same spot, and third double crochet. So I've got, this is called a granny cluster, 3 double crochets. And then I'm going to skip 2 again. 1, 2, and then I'm going to go into that third one. So yarn over first, 3 double crochets in the third stitch from where I ended. So this is my first, second, and third. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So the next granny cluster. So now I've got 1, 2, 3 granny clusters done. I'm going to have 8 on one side. So I'm going to skip, 3 double crochets in that third one. 1, 2, and 3. Skip, 3 double crochets in the third from my hook, or from my last spot, I should say. 2 and 3. Nice thing about double crochets is they're tall stitches, so you start to make progress pretty quick. All right, so skip, and we're gonna yarn over and 3 double crochets in that next spot. And third double crochet in that spot. Okay, skip, 3 double crochets in that third from where you just entered. So always 3 double crochets in for a granny cluster. 3, okay. Skip. Okay, we're gonna go into that third one, skip, 3 double crochets into here. Okay, so let's see what we've got. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 granny clusters. Now that we've got 8 on one side, we are now going to enter our first corner. So our first corner, and this goes for every corner. On every corner, we are going to chain 2. Okay, we're going to chain 2, and that's what we're going to do here. So we're ready to make our corner. We're simply going to do 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, and then now in that last stitch where we've got our stitch marker, we are going to put a granny cluster, and that's going to be our end. So I'm going to take this out so we have room to put our hook in there. I'm just going to set it down. I've chained my 2 for my corner. I'm going to double crochet 3 into that end. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's my corner granny cluster. So this is, as we look, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. Okay, let me zoom out here a little bit. This is my side of my rectangle, okay? And then this is the top one. So this is a corner, and then I'm gonna make another corner. So 2 chains, okay? And then we're gonna turn our corner, all right? And then we're gonna turn our corner. And now we're gonna come back on this side with 8 more granny clusters, okay? 8 more granny clusters. Now, before I do that, I want to mark where I had my chain 2 on my first corner, okay? And then once I make my next granny cluster, I will put in the stitch marker for that one as well. So, so I made my chain 2, and now I need to place my first granny cluster on this side. Now, the granny clusters need to be across from one another. So we're gonna locate on the other side where the stitch was that we put that granny cluster in. So it's right here. So that means that my next granny cluster on this side is going to go in right here. So I have to have a piece of yarn between. You're not going to go back into the same spot. You're going to go right across from it, but with a piece of yarn in between. Okay. So now I'm going to put 3 double crochets in that spot. So yarn over, go right in, and then 3 double crochets in there. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in one more time to make sure you can see exactly where I went in. Okay. All right. So as we look on the other side, here was our last cluster before the corner, last cluster, a piece of yarn in between, and then I went right in right there. So now I've got to add 2 more to that same spot. Yarn over, double crochet in, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, double crochet in that same spot. There we go. Okay, so that is my first granny cluster on the opposite side, directly across from the one on the other side. So now I've got to locate my next one. So as we look down, here's the 3. Here's where they went into their stitch. Here's the yarn in between. So right here, right there is where I'm going to be putting my next 3 on the opposite side. So yarn over, go right into that spot, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Yarn over, put 2 more double crochets right back in that very same spot. Okay, locate my next one. Oops, before I do, now that we've made our corner, let's put our stitch marker into the chain 2 spot right here, as long as I'm thinking of it. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we're good. All right. Now I'm gonna locate my spot. Here's my 3. Here's where they were going in, and now directly across with a piece of yarn in between is where I'm gonna go in with my next one. So I need to yarn over, and I'm gonna go right in directly across, but not in that same spot. 1, 2, and 3. Back in. 3. Okay. And then we're going to continue on. Our next one is going to be, here's the one that we had on the other side. So the next one goes right here. And then we're going to yarn over, go in, pull through 2, pull through 2. And then 2 more double crochets right back into that very same spot. 1, and there, 3. Okay, now we locate our next one. Here's the spot across, yarn in between, and then double crochet 3 into the spot on that base chain. And that's why they're a little harder to see, because that's that original side of the chain. So I use the hole on the opposite side, a piece of yarn in between, and then right here directly across, because that's what we want. Otherwise it won't be symmetrical if it's offset around those corners, and we do want that to be even on either side. There we go. And the next one, cross. Next one, 2, and a 3rd double crochet right in. All right, and then I just need to make 1 more. Okay, 1 more. So on this very last one, might be a little tighter because we're at the very end here. Here's the original on the first side, and now I want my piece of yarn in between, so I am going to go in right there. Okay, so yarn over, go right in, make sure that you don't want to go back into the exact same spot. Remember, you want to have that yarn in between, but we're right on the end now, and that what would have been the first chain of our line. Okay, so now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 granny clusters along this side. I'm going to snug this up so that comes in. And then now I need to make my corner. So again, whenever there's a corner, I need to chain 2. 1, 2. And then I'm going to go into the very end here. Okay, so now you got to kind of look. You're going to just find a spot. That spot's going to be, there's a nice hole right here. You want to be right in the middle. So we're going to do 3 double crochets. So a nice granny cluster right in the middle of the 2 on the either end. Okay. and that's my third to create my granny cluster. So now I've got to complete the corner, 1, 2, and now at the very beginning here was where I started. So I'm simply going to slip stitch to join, and to slip stitch to join, I'm going to go in between that chain 3 that I created first, underneath, and pull through. And that's it. Okay, so now let me add my stitch markers on this end. 1 for the corner, the first corner on this end, and then 1 for the corner just created in the chain 2 space. Okay, so now I've got all 4 of my corners marked. Okay, so kind of let's get perspective here. So we have our foundation going down. That was our 24 single crochets. We have made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 granny clusters on our first side. We made our corner, 2 double crochets in our corner, a next granny cluster on the very end, turned the other side, 2 chains, and then we made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down the side directly across from each other, directly across, okay? Then a chain 2, we created our opposite end granny cluster, chain 2 and slip stitch to join so that we have our very first, if you would, row around all done, okay? Now all we're gonna do is we're gonna continue this process. So let's find out how we get started on our next row. So we've slip stitched to join. Now we want to get to a granny cluster space, okay, the space between each one of these granny clusters, because now in between here is where we're going to, on the next row, create our granny cluster, okay? But to get there, I need to slip stitch over, okay? So I slip stitched once to join. I'm going to slip stitch now in the top of my first double crochet. Slip stitch is just pulling, yarning over, pulling through again. I'm going to slip stitch a second time into the top of that double crochet all the way through, and then I'm going to third time into the space, though not into the stitch, into the space, and I'm going to pull through and through. And now where I'm at is I am right here at my granny cluster space. So the slip stitches were just to kind of maneuver my way over and get to that chain space. Or I'm sorry, not a chain space, it's a granny cluster space. And now I'm going to 1, 2, 3, chain 3, and this is going to be the first, considered the first double crochet in my first granny cluster. So now I'm going to yarn over and do 2 more back in here because I need 3 double crochets to make a granny cluster. So that first one was my chain 3 and 2 more double crochets. And now I'm going to continue my next chain space here. I say chain, I'm so sorry. It's the granny cluster space is where I'm going to do my next 3 double crochets. So I don't have to find a stitch, I just find the space, and they're really easy to find because it's between the V's. I'm going to yarn over, go right down in there, yarn over, pull up. I've got 3 on my hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, first double crochet, second double crochet, third double crochet, and there's my granny cluster, right? There's my granny cluster. Let me kind of pull my yarn apart here. So I've got, and I'm going to continue, yarn over. I'm going to find my next space between the V's. So here's a V of 3, here's a V of 3, here's that space, okay? Yarn over, go right into the space, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 each time. Second double crochet and third double crochet. Okay, next one, yarn over, go into the space, 3 double crochets. Oh, so fun. And what's great about this is you're gaining width and length at the same time. Yarn over, go in that spot between. So easy to find. The granny stitch, like I said, is just so nice because first of all, it's a tall stitch because of the double crochets. Second of all, it's the ultimate crochet cat classic. If you are going to crochet, you've got to know how to do the granny stitch. So this is one variation on it, making a rectangular blanket. I also am going to have some tutorials on my channel that are going to just be granny squares, okay? And granny squares can be made into so many different things. They are very trendy right now. So you see young girls wearing crochet crop tops and using granny square crop tops, granny square bags. So they're so fun to just make into, you know, all sorts of things. Super duper classics. Sorry, my whack here. Okay. All right. So now what I've done is I've gotten my granny clusters in their spots. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. All right. Now, as I'm approaching, my next spot has my stitch marker in it, and that means that that's a corner. Okay. Now, from here forward, going forward, we're always going to do 2 granny clusters in a corner, separated by a chain 2. Okay. I'll show you how to do that. So we are going to first go in with our 3 double crochets. So I'm not chaining yet. 1. Right into that chain 2 space, 2, and 3. Okay. All right, I'm going to take my stitch marker out to just give me a little bit more room. And now I'm going to chain 2. So this was my first granny cluster into my corner. I'm going to chain 2 because this is going to be the corner for the next row. Okay. And now I'm going to do 3 double crochets for a granny cluster to finish that out back into that same chain 2 corner. Okay. So my corner is a granny cluster, 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then a granny cluster, 3 double crochets. All right. Now my next spot again is another corner. Okay. Now before I leave this one, before I forget, let's put our stitch marker back in there so that we know when it comes up. All right. And especially if you're new, I still use my stitch markers all the time. And I've been crocheting for many, many years. Okay. So there's no shame in stitch markers. It's smart to do it because it just keeps track of things, and you're going to be less likely to make errors on the number of stitches that you have. Crochet is all about numbers. If you say, oh, I'm not good at math, if you're doing crochet, you're doing math, and that's not a bad thing. It's not hard math. It's just a lot of counting. And if you're not counting correctly, then unfortunately your work's not going to come out very good. Okay, so we are ready for our next corner. So here we are. So I'm gonna double crochet 3 times into my corner for my first granny cluster. So 1, I've got 2, get some more yarn here, and 3. First granny cluster done, right? Now I'm gonna take my stitch marker out, okay, get that out of there, and I'm gonna chain 2. See, 1 and 2. That's my corner for my next row. Yarn over, go through, and I'll do 3 more double crochets for the second granny cluster in my corner. Okay, so there it is. So here's my end one, and now I've got my 2 granny clusters separated by my chain 2, which creates my corner. And I'm going to put my stitch marker back in. Now I'm ready to go back. All right, along the back side. So here I'm going to continue. No chains in between. I'm going to do a granny cluster in each one of my spaces here. So yarn over, 3 double crochets into that granny cluster space. Keep going. And you just get into like such a rhythm here. And what's great about this is you can sit, watch TV, relax, do whatever. And it's so easy to just kind of like automatically keep going here, because there isn't much thought that you have to do, except just make sure you got 3 double crochets in each one of these spaces. And they're so easy to find and locate, and they're nice and wide open, so they're not hard to get into. So so it's just a great, relaxing, awesome stitch to make so many different things. Okay, so continuing on, getting closer to my row here. I'm sorry, to my corner on the end of my row. Come on. So I hope you're excited about this project. I just love the colors. I love that when you find that self-striping yarn in, you know, hues that you enjoy, there's like no thinking that you have to do. All right. So now I'm here to my next corner. So the next space that I have here, we are going to do 2 granny clusters separated by a chain 2. So I'm going to go in first, no chain yet. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 double crochets for my first granny cluster. Now I'm going to take my stitch marker out. Okay, come on. And then we are going to chain 2, and then 1 more granny cluster right back in that same spot. See, come on. Okay, before I forget, I'm going to put my stitch marker right back in. Now, as you get better and better, you may not need the stitch markers, but again, at first, it's just a nice little insurance policy. Now, my next space is a corner again, so here I'm going to start with no chain yet, my 3 double crochets for my first granny cluster into that corner, and then I'm going to take my stitch marker out, chain 2, and then I'm going to 3 double crochets right back in. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and before I forget, putting my stitch marker back in, and you'll notice that, oh my goodness, we're already around. It doesn't take long. So here you'll see, now I'm ready to join back to that first granny cluster. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to find that chain, and I'm going to go right in there. I'm not even going into a stitch. I'm going right in between here in that chain, and I'm pulling through a slip stitch to join. Done. Okay, and now I'm joined. So let's just kind of peek here before we move on. So what I've created now is I've got another row around. So I've got my 1, 2, 3, let me scooch this up a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4 corners. Okay, I've done 2 full rounds of granny clusters. Okay, and now if we count on any side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So remember, my first row was 8. Now I've got 9. So each time I am increasing by a granny cluster along the horizontal, and then I'm also going to be increasing by a granny cluster along the vertical. So right now on this one, I've got 1, and then I've got 2. Originally I had 1, so I'm always going to increase by 1. So that's why when you do the rectangular here, you're not only getting longer or wider, but you're getting longer and wider every time that you go around. So it's kind of cool. All right, so we're joined. Let's do our scooching over to our granny space. So slip stitches again. We're going to go into the top of our next double crochet, slip stitch, 2 slip stitches, and then we're going to go a 3rd slip stitch into the granny space, pull through, and now I'm ready to do my 1, 2, 3 for the first leg, if you would, of my granny cluster that's going to go right back in. So, and then I'm going to do 2 more. to complete that granny cluster. 1 and 2. And there you go. I think that this is a good start for you to continue to go around, remembering that every time you get to a stitch marker, that's your clue that this is your corner. So in that corner space where you've got your chain 2, you're going to first put 1 granny cluster in, chain 2, and then another granny cluster in. Okay? Then you're going to work across, and then when you get to your next corner, granny cluster, chain 2, granny cluster, and then you're going to work down. Okay? When you get to the end here, it's slip stitch. Then you're going to slip stitch over, and you're going to get to your space, and then you're going to chain 3, 2 more double crochets for your granny cluster of 3 double crochets, and then you're going to continue on. Such an easy, fun way to do things. So I think that is what I wanted to cover for you. So I'm going to come back with our project, and then we will wrap up. Okay, so I wanted to bring our project back and just kind of show you where we're at. So what we have done so far is we created this first line and around the outside and our ends, and now we are at the point where we are like on this 3rd row with our sample. Okay, and all you're going to do is you're going to continue to do that, and it's going to grow in both directions. And when you get to the very end, this is super duper easy. Now, you can just end this without any type of a border, but all I did for my border, I did 1, 2, 3 double or single crochet rows. That was it. And then in each of my corners here, all I did was I went around and I did extra 2 single crochets on each one of those corners as I made that corner. That was it. So a very plain, very simple border of 3 single crochets around the outside. I'm not going to demonstrate that today because I feel like that is very straightforward and simple. But if anybody does need help as they get to the end, just contact me and I'm happy to do that. But it's literally a single crochet. So once you get done with your very last round, all you're going to do is single crochet all the way around the outside, 3 rows, and lickety split, you're all done. So 1 skein for a very beautiful 42 by 32 baby blanket, nice weight, beautiful colors, all set. I hope you enjoy. If you happen to make this, please let me know. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those in the comments. And thank you again. Please subscribe and hit the notifications. This will ensure that my video gets out to others who might be interested. So again, thank you. And I look forward to our next project.